Morning. Just as a quick update to the booklet, I've been hill country farming in Hawke's Bay for the last 4 years, initially on a high-performing 500 hectare sheep and beef finishing farm, and the last 18 months on a 600 hectare block, trying to move down the regenerative farming path. I'm also doing a bit of collaborative research with Landcare Research and the Our Land and Water National Science Challenge. Now, to start with my conclusions, over these 4 years, and especially since starting off on Nuffield, I've stumbled across what I now see as a new world of possibility for our farming businesses and landscapes, which we will lump under the broad umbrella of regenerative farming. I've noticed that the farmers who are realising these possibilities have a different understanding or mindset to many of us, and that they understand the world as a complex network of ecological and social systems, and that they use that understanding to create multiple forms of value that are otherwise often inaccessible to us. For most of these farmers, building strong networks and communities that support them in multiple ways is the foundation of their success. And the need to build these support networks within and between our farming communities is the focus of this presentation. Now, yesterday, Bede touched on relationships and Ryan touched on trust. It was clear from the discussion that we feel we lack solutions to our current environmental challenges. I'm going to suggest that we reframe those challenges as opportunities to rethink some of the assumptions behind our farming systems. So I set off overseas with 2 core questions. How have farmers or rural communities transitioned towards farm systems that are sustainable, resilient, or whatever buzzword in that particular direction you want to include in there? And what can we learn from their experiences to best support the impending transformation of New Zealand farming systems? These questions rested on my observations of the goalposts of our agriculture sector continuing to shift in a big way from what they have been in recent decades. And big changes, which will undoubtedly be hard, are inevitably in our best interests. In total, I travelled for 7 months across 19 countries on 4 continents, visiting a diversity of farmers, people involved in farm support, research, government, and agricultural businesses. The initial focus of my study on transitions towards sustainable, resilient, and buzzword farming shifted as the repeating theme of community-driven innovation became evident on these visits. In the last couple of months, I came across the concept of regenerative farming, which I use more as a unifying concept for the many different types of farming systems that I've visited. I'm not keen on labelling things with broad sweeping terms, but why I prefer the term regenerative farming as opposed to organics, biodynamics, conservation farming, sustainable farming, natural farming, you get the point. You might end up with something like a complex mix of biological and ecological relationships, functions and systems managed by a dynamic interaction of individual and collective social behaviours and cultural norms, which is a bit of a mouthful, so we're going to stick to regenerative farming. So when I'm talking about regenerative farming, I'm talking about the outcomes the farmers are managing towards, and we'll get to those later. I'll say up front that I've visited a couple of farms that would consider themselves to be normal, but are achieving regenerative outcomes in my eyes. There's plenty of crossover between best practice farming and regenerative farming principles in my eyes. But most of us compromise on these principles at some point in order to maintain control or extract a short-term benefit, which often takes us backwards. So let's start with a look at some of these regenerative farmers and land managers. It's possible to categorise the farmers I've visited into 2 broad categories. The first are a small population of unique and impressive individuals that have pioneered completely new farming systems, farming principles and understandings of how to run successful farming enterprises in their particular contexts. The top left photo is Pacho Gangatera in Ecuador, who has run a high-volume, high-value vegetable production system on the same 4 hectares for the last 30 years, with 6 cattle integrated and rotated throughout the system. Pacho's only inputs into this farm have been seed and rock dust as a mineral source, and he's had over 10,000 people visit his farm since. Next to him is Gabe Brown, a North Dakota cropping farmer who, after 4 consecutive years of failed crop harvests, noticed improvements in his soil from not harvesting his failed crops and grazing them instead. The last 15 years have seen him move from no-till, low-diversity monoculture cropping to highly diverse cover crops integrated into his cash crop rotations, with cattle grazing integrated under a planned grazing program. Each successive step has seen his soil health improve incredibly fast and continued to increase his profitability. He's now a highly sought educator on the principles of soil health and treating your farm as an ecosystem. You can find a lot of that online. Joel Salatin, next to him, from North Virginia, has been on the cover of Time magazine as the world's most innovative farmer. The foundation of his multiple enterprises that he runs is a diverse perennial pasture that he calls the salad bar, managed with multiple livestock classes under a holistic planned grazing regime. And finally, below him is Colin Syce, a New South Wales sheep and cropping farmer who's pioneered what's known as pasture cropping. In his case, he grows warm season annual crops within his summer dormant native pastures in combination with a holistic planned grazing regime with sheep. Colin has massively increased the depth and quality of his soil and also his resulting crop and pasture performance. Now, all of these farmers have had university researchers come in to study their farms who have verified and quantified what they're achieving, and those results are changing our previous understandings of what's possible in our farming systems. The second and dominant category of farmers that I visited what I'd call community-supported early movers. These farmers are learning about different possible farming systems, usually online and through smaller community networks. They're also developing support networks of like-minded farmers, researchers, sector and government people, as well as others, to help them find solutions that work in their particular context. We don't have time to go into all of their stories. However, the three on the left are all relatively young farmers. Jen and Matthias Silern, integrated cropping and livestock farmers in Ontario, Canada, working within a biodynamic system. Alex in the middle there is a 2016 Nuffield scholar from Scotland on a hill country sheep and beef farm. And David Walston is another UK scholar down the bottom left there who runs a large mixed cropping operation, and he's starting to integrate livestock also. All of these farmers are observing large improvements on their farms from the context-specific application of regenerative farming principles, and it's clear that all of them are very dependent on engaging with online and local communities of like-minded farmers and supporters in order to keep progressing. These farmers represent what I see as the early stage of a critical mass of farmers, collectively discovering farming practices and systems that better meet our current and future demands. The happiness, energy, love of learning, and the generosity of these farmers is extremely infectious and common among all of them. And perhaps the most defining common attribute that they all had was a difference in mindset that distinguished them from other farmers. This quote from Don Campbell perhaps sums it up best. If you want to make small changes, change the way you do things. If you want to make major changes, change the way you see things. Many of the regenerative farmers that I visited have trained under the holistic management framework that Don teaches in North America. It was universal in my experiences that where farmers had changed their outcomes, they'd also changed the way that they see and understand the nature of their farms, businesses and relationships. And we've got an exercise to further illustrate this. So for those of you that can't see down the bottom there, this is a snapshot summary of the general outcomes that I found regenerative farmers to be focused on. Firstly, being profitable and resilient. Secondly, maintaining a healthy ecosystem function. And by that we mean healthy plants and soils that capture and hold water, maximise photosynthesis, cycle nutrients, and leverage what we might call functional biodiversity. They also aim to support a thriving and connected community and live a happy, fulfilled and meaningful life. And one of the key focuses of regenerative farmers that I visited was leveraging specific understandings of how green growing plants in partnership with soil microbes drive the formation of well aggregated soil and natural nutrient and mineral cycling. One of the big shifts in understanding is how different species of plants growing together will more often collaborate than compete, sharing resources that are distributed by bacteria, fungi and other microbes in the soil. Harnessing this biological potential is allowing these farmers to grow healthier and more productive plants with less or no nutrient, chemical or mechanical inputs, which in turn is driving the positive outcomes below. And just as an aside, the fastest growing of scientific field right now is microbiology, and we're discovering what a massive impact our human gut microbes have on our health and well-being, and how the same principles apply to our animals and to our soil life. It's pretty clear to me that as food producers, if we want to be providing preventative medicine in the form of food, we need to focus on maximising the life in our soils. However, successfully leveraging these plant microbe relationships requires adhering to some specific management principles. These often include things like minimising or eliminating mechanical soil disturbance, having no best soil, and incorporating diversity into your system at all levels. But developing and refining these management systems is really easy or obvious, as the farmers increase the variables they are trying to manage and let go of some of the tools that we've come to rely on. Managing under increased complexity and in different contexts requires more knowledge and creativity than most individuals possess. And finally, in order to successfully manage within these principles requires the right mindset. My experience of regenerative farmers has shown that they're usually very outcome focused. They see the interconnectedness between all of the outcomes below. They think in a systems rather than in a linear fashion. And they value having high trust and diverse relationships with the other farmers, with their local communities, and anyone who shares their interests in achieving their desired outcomes. They understand they're trying to manage a complex and dynamic system with high demands on knowledge and creative solutions. And therefore, they acknowledge that they're dependent on collaboration for their success, and so they dedicate time to building and growing relationships. And as farmers see more positive outcomes resulting from their management changes, this feeds back to reaffirm and continue to shift the way they see the world. So if you want to remember this framework, you can think of it simply as the 5 M's that are highlighted there in red. And just to answer a question that will no doubt come up, these regenerative farmers are by no means averse to technology, and some of them are on the forefront of technology adoption. However, they see technology primarily as a means to support their management rather than as solutions in of themselves. So coming back to what we need to do to help ourselves down this path, we need to develop support networks that enable farmers to comfortably explore different understandings of these biological and ecological relationships and functions on our farms. We need these support networks to function as a place to share knowledge, ideas, and co-create solutions for different contexts. And we shouldn't underestimate the power of simply having a community that believes in you. Currently, a lot of power and resources driving farming change are held by centralised research institutions and local and central government. And I don't believe that as farmers that our challenges or our goals are well understood by many of these people, nor are the systems that they work within designed to understand or work with us. We need to get their people, their resources and their objectives on the ground alongside us if we are to come to common understandings of how we can move forward together. We need to initiate collaborations that embrace diversity from within and outside our communities. We need to value all knowledge equally, rather than valuing the expertise of a researcher over that of a farmer, or of a farmer over that of a consumer. And we need to do this in a way that speeds up our learning cycles, which is where I see massive opportunity. Shared responsibility for small-scale, safe-to-fail experiments undertaken on-farm and between farms that are created, guided and assessed by people with a diversity of knowledge, experience and perspective. So in conclusion, trying anything new or different will inevitably lead us to getting stuck on occasion, and there'll be some unavoidable hard work involved. Hold the questions, Richard. But my experience of exploring the space over the past 4 years have shown me that achieving these regenerative outcomes is possible and profitable around the world and in New Zealand. I'm meeting more and more New Zealand farmers that are into it. My environmental friends are hugely excited by it. As consumers, they want to buy regeneratively farmed food. It makes great stories. It inherently helps solve some of our most pressing societal challenges around resource degradation and human health epidemics. And I'd love to see some of the New Zealand Nuffield community getting in behind it. Thanks.